All right. Well, welcome everybody. And I can't believe it's the last session of the summit. I wish I was there in Vegas, but here I am in Sydney, Australia. So quickly introducing myself, my name is Janan Budge. I'm Vice President, Principal Analyst here at Forrester. I do lots of different pieces of research, but for the purposes of this, I lead our human-centered security research globally. Part of that, of course, is security awareness and training. I've been in cybersecurity for 25 years. I've been a security leader, a consultant, and now in my role as analyst. I've been doing this for the last 5.5 years. I'm going to share with you research that I completed probably late last year after about 5.5 years of evaluating the security awareness and training market, speaking to hundreds and hundreds of end user customers and vendors on the topic. We decided to make a call on the future. So I am really excited about sharing this with you. And my hope out of today's session is really to see how we can work together to disrupt the status quo that I think has been in this field for a while. Although having just listened to Paige's presentation, I am so thrilled that she's already, and as are so many other organizations, taking a lot of this on board. But before I begin, I really want to share a personal anecdote. I don't know how many of you who are watching this have got teenagers. I am the parent of a teenager. This is my teenager, and this is what me parenting a teenager is like. Pretty difficult, to be 100% honest with you all. It's mired with so many things. It's a teenager who is attempting to try out every single risky behavior known to humankind. And we as parents, like many parents of teenagers, we've tried to change her through lecturing, cajoling, so many different things, but alas, it's not really quite working out for us. And therefore, we've ended up with quite a grumpy teenager. Why am I sharing this with you? Well, I'm suggesting that potentially my challenges of having a teenager and trying to parent her and protecting her from causing significant harm to herself, to her family in a modern digital world is potentially similar to the role that you are trying to do, protecting employees in highly digitized environments without them causing disruption and harm to themselves and organizations. What I need as a parent, this is what I need. Ever since I started my parenting journey 15 years ago, people have been sending me parenting books and podcast recommendations. They don't hardly ever make sense to me. And when they do, I, even when I get very, very excited about them, I forget about them a couple of days later. They take up a lot of time, to be honest. And that's time that I need to be doing the job that I love and to raise my other kid. Not to mention that, as parents, for those who are parents, for those who have had parents, that you have behaviors that can unintentionally cause harm to the people around you. So what I really, really would love as a parent is actually a coach, someone to not just give me books and tell me what to do, but somebody who can intervene at a particular point where my behavior is not so ideal as a parent and tell me what on earth to do instead. And the only analogy that I can think of is many of you around the world, I know even in Australia, we had this show, Super Nanny. And I love that analogy, at least for myself. I would love to have somebody who can actually be observing my behavior and my children's behaviors and giving us specific call outs on which behavior, as she would put it, unacceptable, and coaching us on what to do. And I know from hundreds of conversations that I've had with non-security people that they share very similar challenges to me. Employees and humans get all of this training from security on how to behave. The training sometimes bores them to tears. it doesn't always make sense and it can easily get forgotten. It takes a huge amount of time from them to do all of this training, time that they don't have. I know during the course of the research that I did for this particular project, I was speaking to a CISO from a financial services sector in the UK, and they mentioned, or reminded me rather, that in FS, in the first week of every year, employees have to sit through 2 days of training on various regulations. They then learn and quickly have to dump all of this information. There are also many subtleties to risky cybersecurity behavior. For example, having long passwords or complex passwords, which one is better? Even I, who's been in security for the last 25 years, actually forgets. So like me as a parent, what I would love is, instead of being appointed to training or to a book, it would be so incredible if we can gently intervene at the time of this behavior and coach them on how to make a change. So where's all of this going, at least according to us at Forrester? So I want you to come with me and imagine this future where what I've just described is not the case. In the future, that we are suggesting employees can just do their job. They are not referred to as the weakest link or the human firewall. And I am so pleased to hear so many people actually acknowledging this. But also, I really would love us to acknowledge that we need to get rid of this old famous adage that security is everyone's responsibility. I know I certainly not very long ago have perpetuated this, but actually it is not. I would love to see a future where people don't have to worry about security. They can just do their job. I want to see a future where people are not asked to do all of the training about all of the different security things all of the time. Training people until they pass a quiz has really created a situation of beatings are going to continue until morale improves. And the future that we want is going to be based on the risk that the individual is exposed to and is exposing others and organizations to. It's not based on some arbitrary measure such as their business unit or how well they scored on the quiz. And very important in our vision of the future, that we are going to see a very strong link between how training, how behavior, how culture impacts overall cybersecurity posture. Again, I love the previous speaker's relationship between her SOC team, her intelligence teams. That is very, very strong. This function can no longer be a standalone siloed function within the security team. It needs to be elevated to the same level of importance. And at Forrester, we are calling this future adaptive human protection. I would probably say realistically, we are still 6 to 10 years away from this future. There's going to be a stepping stone. The stepping stone is human risk management. And that is what has emerged so strongly over the last 12 months since we published that research, and I'm so thrilled. And that is what's going to overcome security awareness and training's current shortcomings, if you like. Before I go deeper into this future, I want to talk a little bit about the past. I know we all know this, but let me just have my platform for 5 seconds and talk about the events that have led us to be where we are. Training employees is something we've been doing since I entered the profession 25 years ago. And I am really sad to say that I look around and I sometimes think, oh, it has barely changed. I just want to share with you 2 different images, 2 different posters. The first one is recommended by NIST in 2003. And the one on the right-hand side is actually something we received at Forrester as part of our regular security awareness and training. when I put this in front of audiences at roundtables or on stage, and I ask people to tell me which one is from 2022 and which one is from 2003, people can't really guess. So the evolution in how we've trained has actually been quite slow and steady, certainly not the disruption that I think that we need. And it brings the way that we've been doing training, and I know many of you know this, it brings a general sense of dissatisfaction amongst many people, certainly a lot of people that I speak to, that I interviewed. One quote really resonates with me and sits with me. When I was speaking to a CISO, he said that if we stop doing compliance-based training in the way that we've been doing it, we would actually be better off. It's our most significant interaction with users. It's all they see, and it's something they generally end up hating. So when we do that, we've lost them and our risk is higher, basically. Employees, I have sat next to many disgruntled people doing their security awareness and training, including my husband, who should know better. And I've shared this anecdote with many of you. I remember during the pandemic, we were sitting in this tiny little room together, and this very kind, gentle, meek man starts swearing his head off. Turned around, what's happening? And it turns out that he was doing his security awareness training. He was so angry. I said, well, just try and get the most out of it. What if you find something in this that is actually useful? And he goes, why would I find this useful? I've got other things to do. The other major impediment that I think we unfortunately have is compliance. And I'm gonna talk in a little bit more detail about this in a moment, so please bear with me. But just want to share with you, 6% of organizations, according to our data, do not have a security awareness and training program. And 25% of those who told us they do, it is still driven by compliance. Compliance is driving a lot of this, which leads us to focus on the wrong things. I'll dive into a little bit more detail later. There was this really neat study by NIST on measuring the effectiveness of US government security awareness programs. While that's a very limited subset, I found it actually fairly representative of what happens in real life from my discussions with many of you. Amongst leadership, 56% of respondents said that they either strongly agreed that compliance is an important indicator of success for security awareness and training. And 47% of the respondents themselves also agreed strongly with this statement. So if we comply, then we can tick the box. We have made people aware and we've trained them. Tick. Not necessarily how it should be. We decided last year to examine 49 unique regulations and frameworks around the world so that you don't have to, that required organizations to do security awareness and training. We really wanted to understand, well, what is happening? What is driving this compliance situation? It was very enlightening research. This is just a summary of 10 that we thought were the most important. So don't worry too much about it. But we looked at all manner of things. We've got this massive spreadsheet that is available to Forrester clients. This is a summary that's available for you. But we looked at who is required to be trained. When is how often is the training required? What's the level of mandate? But the most important column I want you to look at is the why column. We looked at the purpose that these regulations and frameworks stated. And as you can see, it was often to understand, to maintain knowledge, to make people aware. None of the purpose that was stipulated was to change behavior or change culture. So literally, we want you to train people just to make them understand, well, what is the purpose of this understanding? So that for me is a significant driver for why we are the way we are. And it gets a little bit worse. So let's pretend that compliance as a strategy is okay. What is not okay is how outdated some of these things that we are still using are. We learned through the course of this research that 29 of these frameworks and regulations were created over 5 years ago. 17 of them were created over a decade ago, and 8 were created over 20 years ago. And I can tell you that people are actually still using some of these in the absence of anything else. So, you know, many of those are not talking about human risk management or anything that's related to the future. And as we all know, the problem with compliance is that it does not equal to effectiveness. You can be compliant, you can tick a box, but you're not being effective. And right now, I just want to share with you, according to that data by NIST, how effectiveness is being used. And again, I know the NIST was a reasonably small sample size, but this very much is in line with what I see organizations doing. So people are measuring effectiveness of their awareness and training programs. 84% are measuring them via completion rates and phishing click rates. The problem with those types of metrics is that they, as you probably know, are not providing us with indication of whether or not change has happened. And again, I refer to the previous presentation and some of the measurements that they were using that just made my heart sing. So that's really awesome. So with all of this context, I know it was a lot, but I just, better out than in. And I really just needed to set the scene for, why are we here? And therefore, where do we need to go? So I've been committed to driving us all to play bigger. And I've been doing that in so many different ways. I've been doing loads of these talks, advising vendors, advising my clients, and really, really pushing for a different way. But I have to be honest, I meet with a lot of resistance, and there's, some of that resistance is actually quite valid. It is really difficult to break the status quo. I'm going to share with you a couple of pieces of data. So the vendors, for example, who play in security awareness and training are, they're benefiting from continuing to do things the way that we are. There are some estimates by some firms that the spending on security awareness and training products is going to reach $10 billion by 2027. So it's something that's obviously working. So why change it? With all of our focus on increasing the attention on the human side of security, which is so wonderful, and it's something I've been advocating and wishing for my whole entire career, I worry that maybe we might just end up doing status quo things by accident. So according to a survey by SANS a couple of years ago, security awareness and training is now one of the top 15 jobs in cybersecurity, which is really cool. But so long as we perhaps start shifting the focus of what this awareness and training is doing and move towards human risk management. And I think the very fair parts of this resistance that I get is that so many of us are like, okay, we know all of these problems, but what else can we do? Like, what else is there out there in the world? And that's what I'm about to share with you now. I'm going to give you 6 ideas, and really looking forward to hearing your perspective, your comments, your thoughts, your feelings about all of this. Number 1, I really, really would love for all of us to extend our idea of what security behaviors are. I showed you this chart before, and how organizations are measuring effectiveness. There's, sometimes we measure effectiveness by change in behavior. such as employees reporting on simulated phishing or reporting incidents. That is really cool, but these are just 2 out of 70 or more possible digital behaviors. We really, really need to extend our idea of what security behaviors are. They're not just phishing, they're not just incident reporting. So one resource that has been a real game changer for me, and I know for many of you, is SebDB, the Security Behavior Database, which is a crowdsourced database by a company called CypSafe, which contains a massive, comprehensive list of over 70 digital behaviors that you can pay attention to. If you're all interested, I can put the link to it in the Slack chat thing later on. What's really cool about it is it also ties all of these different digital behaviors to risk. I have listed only a few of those behaviors just for the purposes of demonstrating that it's not just phishing, it's not just reporting incidents, using password managers, not sharing passwords, enabling firewalls, enabling VPNs. These are all digital behaviors that we are training people on, but less often we are not measuring whether or not there has been a change in those behaviors. So really, really urge you to have a look at the overall behavioral landscape, set the baseline. What do you actually want to change? Which of those behaviors? What is your target? Your next step then becomes to really understand what is the human risk. And this is actually what led me to write this research. So I mentioned to you that over the last 5.5 years, I've received hundreds of briefings by some amazing vendors in the security awareness and training space. Really well-intentioned, brilliant. And I remember at the beginning of this job, I was quite underwhelmed. I was just seeing training after training after training. Sometime 2-3 years ago, I'd say 2020, I started seeing disruption by some of the smaller vendors and some of the larger ones as well. And that disruption, we ended up terming it the human risk quantification. What human risk quantification is quantifying the risk that a human is exposed to or are exposing the organization to. This is not their risk score based on their responses to quizzes. No, it's a data-driven approach. The risk is measured by human actions based on their actual security behaviors. Those words are very, very important. Again, I really want us to move away from this human risk concept based on arbitrary measures, and really, really want to call out that it's based on their actual behaviors. The really cool thing about this disruption is once you know that, you can then initiate interventions where they're most needed. And you'll note that I use the word interventions, not training, because interventions can be certainly training or coaching based. You can intervene at the point when there is a less than desirable behavior, but there can also be policy based. So we now have tools that would enable you to adjust the policy based on the risk that an individual is exposed to or exposing you to. So here is some examples for you of how this could work. A particular organization has improved the behavior of individuals accepting auto updates to 96 times in 100. Users at a particular organizations are twice more likely to use the password managers as a result of training. I know that when I started looking at these tools, these processes, these practices, once you see this, you can't unsee it. And you can't go back to measuring effectiveness by simply looking at completion rates. Now, when I talk about the future, one question is, well, is content dead? Is content dead? No, in my opinion, absolutely not. I know that a lot of security awareness and training and some of the things that I have critiqued have been all about content. And I've seen a lot of briefings from vendors about better content, better quizzes, etc. And I don't love that. However, there is always going to be a room in security, I believe, for excellent content and excellent engagement activities. We are always going to need to engage with and to influence stakeholders in our organization. But if we're going to do it, we have to do it well. This is a whole other presentation, but I just wanted to share with you 10 design principles when creating content. Make it count, make it personal, make it relevant, inclusive, engaging. Consider that you have a global audience in many, many instances, micro and nano learning, all of these amazing principles. So content will remain important. Number 5, initiate interventions where they're most needed. Again, if I think about the future, I want to see a future where people aren't trained about all of the things all of the time. They are perhaps coached in the moment of a less than desirable behavior, and either coached, or we can intervene in other ways and adjust the security policies, adjust the security processes to protect the human. That is what adaptive human protection is about. And here is another example for you. Number 6, codifying security culture. It's really interesting. When I started reflecting back, when I started in this job 5.5 years ago, I was screaming the word culture from the rooftops. It wasn't popular. It wasn't, the word culture and security was not very popular 5.5 years ago. I am really thrilled to hear so many organizations now talking about the power of security culture, although I'm not really sure that everybody understands what it is. If I go back to being a security leader, probably one of the first things I would do is to codify the security culture in my organization. We are, as an industry, developing quite a rigorous understanding of what a security culture is, thanks to the work of so many different thought leaders and practitioners out there. It is focused on measuring the attitudes, the cognitions, the norms, the behaviors around cybersecurity. The really cool thing about culture is you can really understand the sentiment about cybersecurity, not for the purpose of training people more, but actually, for me, it's to give you a really, really good perspective of, well, what is it about your security policies, your processes, your technologies that is not quite up to scratch? And with this, I'm actually going to go to a couple of summary slides. I would love you to consider what are some of the actions that you will consider changing following from this session. Which one of those 6 things that I've shared with you would you like to take a step on? What are some of the behaviors that you care about? How are you going to expand your view of security behaviors? How are you going to measure them? Will you be quantifying the human risk score based on behaviors? Risk-based interventions, what would they look like for you? Would you change anything about your content? Codifying security culture. Each one of these is quite deep in itself. So I realize I've only just given you a taster. So now I want to come back and to close, remember the future that I talked about, adaptive human protection. From my perspective, from my family's perspective, I really am hoping that we will get to a point where my kids, and later on my son, when he becomes a teenager, we are protected, because I would have uplifted my parenting tools and my processes and adapted that to them and their individual needs and their individual situations, hoping that my lecturing will get a little bit less, and their protection and their safety will be increased. Thank you very much. I really, really welcome your comments, your feelings, and your thoughts on all of this.